Hey guys, it's Brad from Team Crimson here, and we are bringing you a deck profile for Star-Vader Chaos Breaker Dragon. It's the new Chaos Breaker version of the deck, or the new Chaos Breaker Crisis version of the deck. And I don't play the deck, so Zach from our team here, he's actually going to be giving you the deck profile, so I'll just hand it over to him.
Best card fighter on planet Earth. Obviously, my tournaments don't really agree with that, but whatever. For the starter, I play one copy of Carbon, obviously. It's toolbox heavy. This entire deck is toolbox heavy, draw heavy. And this card just allows me to search for any grade 1 or less card that I want. So it's very nice to call out like Zinks or Metnax. To grade 3s, I play 4 copies of Crisis, my baby. He is the new one that you want to ride into. He is amazing. On ride or on stride, you can lock an opponent's rear guard. They choose. And then you can retire one of them at the end of their turn and draw off it. Then the other grade 3, 4 copies of the original Dragon. He got a reprint. I don't like running into him and riding him on my Vanguard because he is limit break. And on top of that, if I want to draw, I have to Soul Blast, which gets in the way sometimes. And on top of that, I could deck out easier. Moving on to grade 2s, I play 4 copies of Mulepton. She's Counterblast heavy, but it makes me able to make them call cards from their hand as locked from or to the field. And I get to choose too, so that's very nice. Then moving on to my other grade 2s, 4 copies of Iron. I play 4 of him now, but as soon as my 4 copies of Photon come in the mail, I'm going to take 4 of this out. The only differences between them is this is Counterblast heavy, and you have to have a Vanguard with Chaos to lock, whereas Photon doesn't need Chaos and doesn't require Counterblast at all. And then this one's a little better.
Restricted, so
and yeah,
do it early.
Well, neither of them are. But
Yeah.
This one also gains 2,000, so it helps me with my offensive slightly. But overall, Photon's still better.
It's free.
And then I run 3 copies of Strange Dragon. This one's good on call that turn when he attacks or boosts. He has a boost skill. And then if I am attacking a Vanguard, my opponent chooses a card to lock, and if they can't, it gains 5. So it's pretty good for my offensive once again, which this deck lacks a lot of. And then for grade 1s, I run 4 copies of the Sentinel Thorium, which allows me to draw, so that's neat. I know some people run the Unflip Sentinel. The only problem is it's not a Star-Vader, so it gets in the way of the counterblasts. Then I run 4 copies of Zinc. This is a requirement for the deck. You have to have it or you will counterblast yourself to death and you won't be able to do any skills, really. The Soul Blast or Soul Charge part is not so necessary, not usually, but it does help sometimes when you're running low on Soul, depending on how your game is going. But the counter charge part is really, really good. Then 4 copies of the Star-Vader Stride Fodder. Only works if you go into a Star-Vader, unfortunately. But when you do stride using this card, you can Soul Blast and check top 7 for a Chaos, so that's pretty neat. And then 2 copies of Metanax Dragon. This one's pretty good. I know there's another one that was from Legionera that does the same thing except the +4, and it's not GB restricted. But I still use this one just because I think it's a little better, just because that power increase, once again, helps with my attacking capabilities. Offensive, which once again this deck lacks. On to the trigger lineup. I run 4 copies of Paradigm Shift. This card is really good. Once again, it's Star-Vader. I feel like if you don't run this, then you'll probably deck out many, many games. But I put it to the top of the deck, and my opponent locks a back row card if they have a locked card already. So obviously if I had 3 cards left in my deck and I want to make sure I don't deck out, I can return like 2, 3 how many amount that I can back to the deck, so I get more chances of triggers, and on top of that, my opponent locks stuff, and it helps me from decking out, so that's neat. Then I run 4 more crits, 4 Star-Vader draws with skills. Move to the soul, it's not that big, you don't even really need it. Usually I drop this card for other abilities. And then obviously 4 heal, albino. On to the strides. I run 2 copies of Deluge or the Flood. This card's really neat. I really like it. It's definitely the ace of the build. It's GB3, you Soul Blast 1, choose a card from your G-Zone, turn it face up. Doesn't have to be with the same name. And then you drop 1 card from your hand. Your opponent chooses 2 cards from their hand, places them on separate rearguard circles, and then if they're at 4 or less damage, you choose a locked card and you place it, counterblast it in their damage zone. So it helps with defense. It takes away their defense from my attacks, and then on top of that, increases their damage, so they have to guard everything. And then run 4 copies of Chaos Universe. He is the one that you usually want to go to in first stride. Usually he's the one that helps me with my early triangle locks. Once again, it lets me call an opponent's card from their hand to rearguard circle anywhere I choose. And then on top of that, if I have 2 or more cards face up in the G zone, I can lock a card of my choosing. Then I play 4 copies of Glue Ball Dragon. He is the really only offensive card in this deck. Once again, his only cost is a Soul Blast, and you choose a copy of Glue Ball from your G-Zone and turn it face up. And then, depending on how many cards you have face up in the G-Zone, they choose cards on their field to lock. So, usually after you do into the 4 copies of Universe, you have at least 4 face up, so then you can lock up to 4. It's like, it doesn't take any skill to use this card. It's amazing. And then on top of that, it's GB3, which you will normally get. Your front row gains 3 for every locked card on the field. So that's pretty good. This is the only offensive card they have, but it's really good for later games. Then I run 1 copy of Altwilder, the GB8, because he is amazing. They, once again, have to call cards from their hand. Unfortunately, I have to be at GB8, obviously. I have to counterblast 1, and I have to drop 2 cards from hand. And on top of that, depending on how many cards they have in their damage zone, they call cards from their hand as locked to their open rearguard circles. So sometimes I can get away with him using him. The most I've ever locked on their field is 4, because most of the time when I unlock cards, I don't retire them. And sometimes they don't play light field against me, so obviously I'm locking all their crap, and I barely go into him and use him to his full effect. Obviously, 1 copy of Seabreeze. You usually don't want to go into this card, though, because, once again, it's counterblast heavy, and this deck needs its counterblast if you want to lock. But it's just there, just in case, if your opponent's grade sticking you. Then I play 1 of Karina. This card is amazing. It lets me shut down decks that are attacking me or whatever. Or I know, being a Nova Grappler player, I have actually played against this card, and it immediately shuts me down for favorite champ, because they'll lock like my whole back row, and I need 3 in order to restand my Vanguard. So it immediately shuts down my restanding for favorite champ Victor. Then I play 1 copy of this. It's another draw. Soul Blast 1. If my opponent has 2 locked cards, I can draw a card, just because helps me thin the deck out and get more cards in my hand for defense. And then I know usually people don't play this, but I find it really effective for defense, which I already have plenty of because my hand is massive. But I actually play 2 of the Destiny Guardian. I unlock 2 of theirs, and then, or 2 cards in general, and then if I do, it gains 10 to the shield. So it increases my defense and allows me to call less cards from my hand. Usually I'll use Crisis to immediately retire like one in the front row, or one of them to make sure that they can't use skills still or attack me in any way. And then on top of that, yeah, the 10 shield usually is why he is a good card. And that's it.
Alright, that's it, guys. Please make sure to like and subscribe to our channel, and we'll be bringing you some more content later in the week.
Triangle.